Why does your baked face look so patchy and like crap? Baking, when done right, can be super flattering on the face. It gives you a facelift without the surgery. But there could be one simple, silly mistake that you might be making while baking that actually cakes up your face. Today, I'm going to tell you what it is and how to fix it to get the most flawless filtered coverage. So if you're ready, let's begin. Before you bake your face, it's important to prep your skin. I'm starting with the moisturizer here, and for that I'm going to be using the Essential Energy Hydrating Cream by Shiseido. This is a fast-absorbing moisturizer cream and supports skin's natural production of hyaluronic acid and provides that deep, intense moisture that's long-lasting. I use this as a primer as well because it has that sticky feel to it. The next step in the process of base makeup is, of course, to use a foundation. And I'm going to be using the House Labs Triclone Skin Tech Medium Coverage Foundation in the shade Medium Neutral, which is 300. As always, I like to dot it with my finger on my face before I spread it out with the tools, either a brush or a sponge. That's because if you apply the foundation directly over the brush or a sponge, they will absorb it. So by doing this, you're applying most of the product on your face and then you're using the tools just to spread it out. The brush that I'm using is the Real Techniques foundation brush, and I'm going to link everything in the description box right below this video. I love that this foundation is buildable and I can do either light or heavy coverage by layering up. It's a long-lasting foundation, so it's not going to fade or oxidize, and I love the fact that it gives a very natural skin-like finish. Next up is concealer, and I'm going to be using my favorite Milani concealer in the shade 145, which is warm beige, a true match to my skin tone. Concealer is what we will be baking. I'm going to apply this where I have uneven skin tone, mostly under my eyes and around my mouth. I like to let it sit for about a minute till it's a little bit tacky before I blend it out. That way it gives me more coverage. If you blend it out immediately, it's going to shear out and it's not going to give you enough coverage. I'm using a concealer brush here. You can also use a sponge, but sponge tends to absorb some product. So if you don't want to shear it out, if you want full coverage, go with a brush. Baking is the process of using powder over concealer and keeping it on the concealer for a few minutes. Don't dust it off immediately, just let it sit there. Your body temperature is going to blend your concealer with the powder. So that's the baking process to give a flawless coverage. That's also going to add structure to your face. On my left side, I'm going to show you what people usually do when they bake their face that results in a patchy look. And on my right side, I will show you how to fix the mistake. I'm going to be using the One Size translucent powder to bake today. With a powder puff, I'm going to start pressing in over the concealer that I just blended out. As I explained, we are not going to dust this off because we are going to let it bake. So it's going to sit over the concealer for a few minutes. I'm also going to add structure to my jawline, so I'm going to be using the powder there as well. And that's how many people bake their faces, which results in a very patchy look. You'll see when I dust off the powder. On my right side, I'm going to show you the actual way to bake so you get the most beautiful structure and coverage. First, I'm not going to start baking immediately after applying concealer. I'm going to let it settle and dry. And then before going in with the powder, I'm going to remove any creases that I might see. Next, I'm going to take a small amount of powder with a blending brush, dust off the excess, and set underneath my eyes. This is going to add just a dust of powder so the concealer can absorb and set. We are doing this to prevent the concealer from settling in the fine lines and creasing. Next, I'm taking the powder with a larger powder brush, dusting off the excess before I set my face on the right side. This is going to ensure that the powder is going to mix with your cream and fluid products like the foundations and concealers and set it. As you can see, I dusted off most of the powder. I'm using very less product. Once I've completed the step of using the lightest dust of powder to set my face is when I will bake. Again, using the triangle powder puff, I'm going to dip it in the powder and I'm going to remove the excess by patting it in the back of my hand. And just like I did on my left side, I'm going to press it in under my eyes and in my jawline using the powder puff. Do you see the difference here? On my left side, I started baking on top of wet products. So the concealer and foundation were not even dry, and I went in with a lot of powder. So that made the powder stick over the wet products. And on my right side, although I'm using the same products, I let my foundation and concealer dry by lightly setting it with a dust of powder before I went in and baked. So now you're baking over dry products. And because we removed some of that excess powder on the back of our hand, you can see clearly on my right side, the powder application is lighter than my left side. Now it's time to let it bake. So I'm going to let it sit on my face for about 5 minutes. It's baked for about 5 minutes and it's time to dust off that powder. Let's start on my left side. I'm using the powder brush to try and dust it off. I say try because clearly, as you can see, that powder is not going anywhere. No matter how much you try, it's going to stay there and look patchy. Again, the reason for this is we use too much powder over the wet concealer and foundation. So now the powder is clinging on to the wet products and it's not moving. And the more we try to dust off this powder, more patchy it's going to look. Now let's try to dust off that powder on my right side. I'm going to very lightly start dusting it off. And as you can see in my jawline, how much ever powder needed to be absorbed in my skin is absorbed. It looks snatched, but the excess powder has come off flawlessly. Now it's time to dust off what is underneath my eye. And with just a few delicate swipes, you can see all the powder will come off. Whatever needed to be absorbed in the skin and baked is baked, and it looks fantastic. It brightens the under eye. I'm going to do the same in my forehead as well. And as you can see, that baking looks absolutely flawless on my right side. Let's try again on my left side. I'm going to swipe again a couple times and see if that powder comes off. And as you can see, it's going nowhere. It still remains cakey and patchy. If you try to apply more concealer over this or foundation over this to fix it, it's going to look even more cakey. The only way to fix this is to remove the makeup completely. So I'm using a wet wipe to remove the makeup on my left side. I'm not a fan of makeup wipes, but just for the sake of this video to show you the process, I'm doing it. I'm going to start over again with my moisturizer. Just as a reminder, I'm linking all of the products in the description box as well as in the pinned comment below. Next up is the foundation. If you plan to bake, whether it's a special occasion or what have you, make sure to prep your skin really well. That plays a very important role before you bake. If you have patchy or dry skin to begin with, whatever products you apply over it is going to look patchy. Now for the baking process, first I'm applying the concealer. I'm going to let it sit for a couple minutes till it's a little bit tacky and then blend it out to give me that extra coverage. Baking is not an everyday makeup, at least for me. I know some people do this every day, but for me, I like to keep it on special occasions when I have that extra time. I'm going to let that concealer completely dry before I use very little powder with a blending brush to set under my eye. And then dust of powder on a powder brush and set my face. Now that the left side is completely dry, I'm going in with baking. So I'm using the triangle puff, taking some powder, patting it in the back of my hand and pressing it in. If you don't have a triangle puff, you can use just a regular powder puff. If you don't have a powder puff, you can also use a dry sponge. I'm going to let that sit there for about 5 minutes before I dust it off. And as you can see now, that looks flawless. I want to show you the completed look. So let's add a little bit of warmth. I'm going to be using a bronzer. This is the Butter Bronzer by Physicians Formula. To add a sun-kissed look, I'm going to mostly use it in the circumference of my face. For blush, I'm going to be using the Gen Nude Powder Blush by Bare Minerals in Strike a Rose. Again, removing the excess and applying it to the highest planes of my cheekbones. For lipstick, I'm going to first use the Makeup Forever Artist Color Pencil in the shade Whatever Walnut, which is 606. This is going to be my lip liner. And I'm going to fill in my lips with the Huda Beauty Cream Lipstick in Empress. This is a very pretty nude. I'm going to lightly dab it to the center of my lip and I'm going to spread it out with my finger. And here is the finished look. I really didn't do any eye makeup because I wanted to keep the focus on the baking. And as you can see, if you bake in the right way, it gives you the most flawless coverage as well as structure to your face. Does your baked face look cakey? Let me know in the comment section below, and I'd love to know if you were making this mistake. I know I used to years ago when baking was such a new concept, and it took me a lot of trial and error to figure it out. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. As always, if you did, please don't forget to thumbs up. And if you're new here, please consider subscribing. If you enjoyed the concept of baking, you will also enjoy this tutorial. It's about how to lift your face with makeup. So don't forget to click and watch. And I love you guys so much. And I will see you soon with a brand new one. Bye, guys.